Okay, let's get started. Welcome everybody to what I hope and expect to be a very exciting dialogue about the future of the workplace, which we all know to be a very hot topic right now and one that changes every single day. I'm joined here with Brian Berthold, who's a global lead of global lead of workplace experience at Cushman and Wakefield, along with Ian Ferguson, who is the chief operating officer at Payday. So welcome to you both. It's good to have you guys here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And for those who don't know, my name is Adam Samples. I'm the president of staffing at Atrium Staffing. We're headquartered in New York City, woman-owned, and we've actually been celebrating our 25th anniversary in business all year long. So we're very excited about that. Look, I'm happy to be collaborating with these guys this morning. Appreciate all of you guys tuning in. We're going to be taking a look at a host of things, including analytics that have been aggregated from over 4 million data points from companies across the globe, illustrating those relevant outcomes with some of our own personal experiences, which I think is really important to bring to life. And it's important. It's important to better understand the work that lies ahead and understand where we stand today. So with that, I'm going to kick it off and turn it over to Brian to kick us off with some of his data. Brian.
Sure, thank you. Hello to everybody. Thanks for joining. So I was going to kick it off. At Cushman Wakefield, we have a survey process called Experience per Square Foot, and we had been running for about four or 5 years. And it was basically set out a process to diagnose the experience of people in the office working. And we had about 5% of the population working from home at the time. So we had some information and data around that. But when the pandemic hit, it kind of put everything to a screeching halt. There wasn't any office to go measure. So we created a product called Experience per Square Foot at Home. And it's been a fascinating journey. We geared a survey to kind of do three things. First, help companies understand the current experience of their employees while they're working from home, who's struggling, who's thriving. And we can cut this by various demographics, so generation, location, type of industry. Second, we also want to let companies know and understand how well they're keeping their workforce informed during this and cared for. And lastly, we wanted to set it up, what we call the world's largest work from home experiment. How can this data help educate and influence how the return to office actually should and could occur? And has the role of the office been redefined? Well, I'll share with you some of the findings from this survey. So we've got over 2.5 million data points now, about 55,000 people in 100 countries have taken this survey. So we actually have more data points now in the 3-month period than we had in the whole 4 years prior to this. Participation rates average around 60% for companies. So people really wanted to get their voice heard. So it's rich from that standpoint. And the two questions I always get are, how well are people doing? And should we be working this way going forward? So I'll tell you, simply put, people can get work done. But our culture and connections are not good. People don't feel well. And furthermore, we've got this other element where younger people are struggling even more so than the older generations. So those are kind of the four themes. So one, we're still working. And our data is showcasing we've got two categories around people being able to focus and be productive, and then teaming. And we found that focus has been maintained. About 75% of people say, yeah, I'm still productive at home. And we've actually had a 10% increase in productivity on collaboration and teams. And I think a lot of that is because the use of video conferencing and the technology and tools are actually doing exactly what we set them out to do. But that's all the good stuff, and it's about the work. But when I look at the softer elements, the second element, human connections are suffering. So while the work's getting done, interactions tend to be very project and work focused. People are not really socializing like they used to. And as a result, people are starting to feel a loss of connection to their colleagues. There's this loss to company culture, and learning is taking a backseat. So there's this kind of unplanned goodness that comes from in-person environments where collisions and these types of serendipitous conversations take place that are just not happening now. We've also seen, as another element, our personal well-being is taking a hit. So we're in this phase of what I call work-life blur, and people don't know when to actually turn it off and stop working. I kind of paraphrase it that I can work, live, play, and shop all from the same chair. And that's challenging on people. They have low energy. Many are distracted, have lack of movement. And it's all impacting both personal and mental well-being, physical and mental well-being. And that's really a challenge. How do we overcome those things? So, this is things that nobody was trained for, and everybody's reacted, differently in this timing. And then lastly, this element around the younger people. The younger you are, the more you're struggling. And when we started this study, we thought, hey, these are the digital natives. These are people that know how to use all these tools. The older generations are going to struggle more. But what we found out is a lot of this tends to be more around a myriad of logistics. Younger people are less likely to have adequate setups at home. They may not even have the right space, or they're working at the kitchen table. There's connectivity challenges, and a lot of them sharing spaces with others trying to work from home as well. I had one younger couple tell me they have one office, and they are fighting over who's got the conference call so they get it. The person who doesn't get it has to work at the table, and they have 3 kids under the age of 5 who can't go to school or daycare. So they're playing those kinds of things. And equally, caregiver responsibilities for younger people when schools shut down. They've got just a myriad of things going on all around them. I myself, as a baby boomer, I'm an empty nester. I have my own office. Hey, this is great. No distractions. I'm pretty focused. So we find a lot of that is driving what is quite a discrepancy between the generations. Just to kind of go in a little bit more detail on some of these things. So productivity, focus, and overall collaboration. And I welcome any input from you, Ian, Adam, as we're talking about these things. Both are around 75%, but teaming was always lagging slightly behind people's ability to focus. So we've seen this 10% increase. And we saw some interesting data around 90% of people are feeling trusted by their managers to carry out work, which I think is pretty impressive, given that we're all thrust into this virtual environment. So from that standpoint, I'm seeing a lot of companies that said, hey, this is working. Our bottom line results may not be shifting as much, depends on your industry. Why don't we keep this going and make it optional whether you come back to work? But
Brian,
again,
I have a question for you. In terms of the data that you're seeing or opinions that you at Cushman & Wakefield are generating internally, are these productivity numbers or the trends that you're seeing sort of general to remote work and what is possible with remote work? Or is there something specific to remote work in this particular moment that we find ourselves in, right? Remote work against the backdrop of the pandemic. Is there any way to sort of know whether we're looking at universal truths of remote work or something about remote work specifically now?
a great question. And I think an answer to that is you have to separate what's a near-term temporary kind of situation versus long-term impacts. So near-term, let's face it, there's a lot of people with a lot of options they normally could do in their life that are not available. So a lot more housebound, a lot of places closed. So it's all about the work. What else am I going to do? a tendency we tend to find long term is like I'll get a lot of senior leaders worry, hey, if I let them work from home, how do I know they're working? And what we find, and this is true in the evidence through this survey too, is people don't know when to turn it off. It's this work-life blur. I get up, I start working, I didn't realize the sunset, and they don't know when to actually stop. So I think it's a little bit more progressive just because life has been kind of turned off. You're doing all your errands as remote as you can. But I think what it's done is validate that productivity can be maintained. And I think that's big. 5 years ago, I think there'd be a lot more struggles. I've seen a lot of companies, it was really a push to try to let people start to work from home. And here I'm seeing companies realize that the work that can be done, let's face it, if you're in retail and other industries, there's there's immediate impacts just because of business. We're no different. There's not a lot of leasing going on at the rate that it was prior to this, as an example. But for the work we have to do, everyone's engaged, people are available, there's a lot more meetings, and we're getting through these things much more efficiently because we're focused a lot more on the work. What we did see prior to COVID is for those that did work at home, higher engagement levels, productivity slightly better, and their overall work experience a lot more positive. A lot of it was tied to flexibility. It's not so much, about the job itself. It's that freedom to choose when and where to work and how to work, and be able to accommodate my life at the same time. And this is much bigger importance around the younger generations. They kind of live in that work-life blur. I may work a little, I may go for a run, I'll come back, I'll work till 8 o'clock. That's my schedule. That freedom to do it plays a vital role in the long-term longevity around all of this.
Yeah, that's fascinating, Brian. That's such great insight, and a lot of it resonates with me and personally, and also with my company, but certainly with that of which I'm hearing with our clients, several hundreds and count. So, there's so many different directions we can go with this conversation, right? Be it productivity or well-being or engagement. You've spoken a lot about the younger generation, which is even more fascinating, being that they are tech natives and those who we thought would embrace this because they've been asking for it for so long. Now we've been forced into this environment to really test the viability of work from home with the masses. And I think one thing that's been established through just everything that you just said is from a productivity standpoint, at least now, it's viable. It's more than viable. So the question is this a moment in time? What will this look like a year from now, 2 or 3 years from now, on the productivity front? But certainly now it's there.
Yeah, I think what this has shown is the productivity can work if we got these challenges to kind of work through these elements that popped up around where I talked about everybody struggling. So we created an index called the CARE Index, which is, do people feel they have enough time away from work, a sense of well-being, whether they're physically active, does a company support a work-life balance? And it's interesting because we found a lot of people have strong results in pride in their company, the future direction of the company, the culture of the company. But when we ask them about their own well-being, only 54% of people reported having a sense of well-being, which is a lot lower than before. And I found it fascinating. Ask them, what do you think about the company culture? Awesome, through the roof. How about your connection to that culture? That's really struggling. They're feeling a loss of sense of that. So, yeah, I think productivity-wise, we can do that. But for the long term, if we look at employee engagement surveys and methodology and why people are attracted or stay at your company, a lot has to do with a thriving culture. And if you long-term are having people feeling less and less connected to that, you've got an attrition risk. So I think it's solving through those things. We also see that people have a strong desire to continuously learn and develop, especially the younger generations here. It's been a face-to-face that kind of, I think about it, I have millennial daughters who work in their tribes. Their tribes are close-knit circles. They go get coffee together. They go on walks. They do a lot virtual, but they have this mentorship, this kind of thirst to always work in groups. And that was torn away from them. I had my daughter actually show me how they're doing a video dance club Friday nights. For 2 hours, people just randomly come in, and she showed me there's like a 5x3 grid of people dancing. She says, that was fun at first. It gets old. I miss my peeps. And that's what we're seeing is, and if you were to ask me what's the role of workplace, I think the role is shifting kind of away from just about productivity in the cube in the office to convening the workforce to create those social environments, to reinforce culture. I call it the physical manifestation of your culture, where you cultivate relationships and clients and sales. Those are huge, and that's what's missing, and that's where I think coming back to the office is important.
Hey, Adam, maybe I could jump in there and just give a little context for what Heyday is and sort of the kinds of conversations that we've been having with our customers.
Absolutely.
Great, thanks. So for context for the folks on the call, Heyday is a new application specifically around wellness screening, communication between employer and employee, first and foremost around risk of COVID, but evolving into sort of broader conversations around employee wellness. Heyday sits within sort of a larger platform ecosystem. The company that I work for is actually called Pinata. We develop enterprise software and business intelligence software for managing remote teams, and Heyday is our latest application. Something really that we'd never contemplated prior to about 3 months ago. Our flagship product manages field marketing teams, actually frontline marketing teams. But we were speaking with many of our customers who said, actually what we're doing right now is thinking very deeply about screening, bringing people back to the office, gathering data, and sort of using a similar mechanic to what they've relied on Pinata in the past for, but for a new application, a new use case, specifically wellness tracking, health screening. And, we sort of dove in head first to this world of employee engagement, thinking about wellness in a way, a communication stream that had not previously really existed on a day-to-day basis between employer and employee around how people are feeling. Heyday itself is actually a sort of acronym, if you will, for how are you today? And it's really a question that's meant to sort of initiate this dialogue. And as companies are starting to set this up to manage both remote teams and teams coming back to the office, they really are sort of engaging with questions that I think, for the most part, HR teams hadn't previously contemplated. Asking people if they are symptomatic, asking people if they are healthy, really in a more overt way than ever before, and then also asking how they're feeling emotionally from a well-being perspective. And it's starting conversations around culture, around health, and the sort of employer's role in that I think are sort of unprecedented, especially as teams are increasingly distributed, right? Some people are checking in from home, others on site, others expressing a wish to come back on site even as offices remain closed. And everybody's sort of coming up with their own answers for that. And it feels, I think, scary and perhaps oftentimes a little bit creepy, and not to mention risky, to start thinking about bringing people back to work and asking these sort of personal questions. But it is sort of the new normal, and people are saying, how do we split this difference between productivity at home and culture building and camaraderie in the workplace. And so a lot of this data that you're speaking to, Brian, is what we're sort of grappling with in terms of how we take what's working, right, in the remote side of things, and then also sort of re-engage in the physical world in a way to sort of offset some of the problems that are emerging. And it's a tough balance to strike.
Well, a great point is we found correlations between the groups of people that could work remotely.
Yeah.
So like the 4 key lead indicators we found, we asked the question in general, should companies be pursuing more remote work? And do you personally want to work more remotely? And we found these correlations that people that want to work more remotely feel really trusted by their managers. They had a 90% score. 82% of them felt they were properly informed and knew what was going on. They got the 75% mark of being able to collaborate effectively and focus. And they scored a 73% think these remote working policies should be expanded.
Yeah.
When we looked at the driving to return to office, we found those that were only about 50% and below saying, I feel connected to a company culture. 56% felt, only 56% felt connected to colleagues. About 2/3 said they could learn. But the one that stood out was less than half felt a sense of well-being.
Right.
And it told us that, hey, companies in the past have struggled to kind of get business cases around well-being kind of seen as a nice to have. And we're saying, no, this is actually critical. If companies are going to move to this new normal, and to me, a new normal, my definition is prior to this COVID, about 2/3 of the people said they would predominantly work in the office. Now I'm seeing about 50% in this normal of, hey, I want to work in both places.
Yeah.
You probably think, hey, this is a heads down assignment, I'll stay at home, but here I got to interact, I'll come in the office. But this well-being piece isn't just a nice to have. I've got to solve that because people working from home are struggling there. And where we find an issue is, hey, I can raise that, but it's too late to then check in 3 months later and ask, hey, did that gym or whatever we did improve things?
Yeah.
I think real-time access to data and how people are doing is going to be really critical because everyone's going to go through this trial balloon. People want to know, what should I do to set up the office? And hey, we're putting best practice in right now. We have a 6 feet office concept that we're doing, but until you actually get out there, you don't know, is it working?
Yeah.
Like what you're describing is real-time measurement.
Right. Well, and what's interesting about why people are sort of implementing, in our case, these sort of health screening measures and these wellness tracking measures, we went into this thinking, a couple of value propositions, so to speak, would be paramount. Number one is achieving better health outcomes, right? Cut from the same cloth as creating distance and other measures that you would implement in the office. Mitigating risk, right? Disruptions to business, and also mitigating liability, right? Creating from a compliance perspective, we're seeing local governments sort of implement new regulatory considerations in terms of requiring people to be screened when returning to work. So there were all these sort of risk mitigation value propositions, but actually when we talk to our customers, two of the other major reasons that people are looking into these new types of measures, number one is to build trust, right? To build trust and confidence in the both internal team as well as for people who manage spaces like retail environments where customers are coming in, quick service, for example. They want to be transparent about taking measures to promote wellness, to create safe environments, and use that to facilitate a rebuilding of trust. And one of the second thing that I have found a little bit surprising is that we're hearing from HR managers that employees are actually asking for these sorts of screenings. They're not necessarily looking at them as, Big Brother watching them, so to speak, but more as something that they actually want and expect to sort of have this dialogue with the employer, both to ensure that the facilities are being watched over and made safe and healthy, but also because they sort of are looking to their employer for guidance, for resources, for knowledge, to promote their own well-being on a personal level, right? To sort of address some of that lack of well-being that you're seeing, I think, in your data.
I think a lot of times, simply put, trying to sell those concepts prior to this was difficult.
Yeah.
We can actually leverage the fact that people want this. It may feel Big Brother-ish, but right now it's all about health and safety.
Yeah, it's a real moment of behavior change, and rapid behavior change, sort of across the board.
The other thing I've seen is there was a lot about scheduling softwares for desks and conference rooms and things like that, and now they want the same technology. So smart building technology is actually really growing in its purpose because people want to know who's there, when they're not there, when should I go clean it, how is the space being leveraged,
right?
Not just about, hey, I need to find a seat.
Yeah.
And we've had many debates even on desk sharing. So if we move to this more flex norm, not everybody's coming in all the time. Do we really need to have assigned seating? Well, the answer on a spreadsheet is no.
Right.
That would be kind of not frugal, but at the same time, well, how do I guarantee the health and safety of people in a sharing environment? Because yes, if you assign me a seat and it's packed in the sense of benching area, but that area over there is open,
yeah,
I'd like to have the option to go where I feel healthier, safer, and have that social distancing norm.
Yeah.
But how do I know it's clean? How do I know what's in the place? So I think you need the technology to be aware and have a finger on the pulse. And I think you're seeing that openness to people embracing, yes, be smarter about what I'm doing and predict what I'm doing so that I don't feel compromised and that you care about.
Yeah, and it's incredible that you guys were able to activate your tech that quickly. It just speaks to the innovation that you guys have been able to develop with your own platform. But we talk about well-being. You guys have talked about it ad nauseum now. It's a huge thing. People are being very proactive and deliberate about wanting to know these things, and you can define it in a lot of different ways, whether it's physical health or mental health. But on the physical, they're asking for PPE. They're wondering if the environment's going to be socially distant. You've got firms who are now not only some on one end of the spectrum that are committing to a full work from home flex on a go forward basis, and you've got other we've seen it with some of our Fortune 1000 clientele who are committing to taking the next year or two completely redoing their internal layout and their desk configuration to accommodate social distancing, to create more of these collaboration hubs, to make it more of a hoteling type workstation environment. And they're making long-term decisions based on what we're seeing right now. Those of which we even spent recently millions of dollars on one office configuration and are now willing to completely tear that down over the course of the next 12 months and create another one and spend that sort of capital to accommodate that. So that's very, very telling in terms of whether or not this is sort of a flavor of the month thing or if this is going to have long-term implications on the way we work.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, we are seeing, I think, some things that are, one would hope, temporary, right? In terms of, let's say, COVID screening specifically, right? Whether that's 6 months or a year or more or less, we have to hope that has a shelf life. But I think that some of this behavior change that we're seeing happen so rapidly will have sort of permanent reverberations. And I think probably first and foremost among them is a more ad hoc workforce from a work location perspective, people who are sort of striking a more idiosyncratic balance between working remotely and working on site, the on-site environment perhaps being a little less sort of centered around the concept of an owned desk, and more, I like that hotel sort of analogy. I think that's what I think people at least are foreseeing for the next 6 months to a year. But probably some of that has even longer term legs.
Yeah, I think one thing that I caution people on, one, we know it's never going to go back to February, the way we were working prior to this. So people are like, hey, is this temporary or whatever? It shifted enough that it may ebb back to something. It will never go back to the way it used to be.
Yeah.
Too many people have had a taste of this. I kind of laugh. I've seen some of the, reporting that, 2-3%, 5% of our company work from home, and that could double. And I've got people self-reporting, 54,000 people, 55,000 people. I have 23% telling me I predominantly worked from home prior to the pandemic.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow. And I have about 25% that said, hey, I predominantly, it was 2/3 said I predominantly worked at the office, and only 13% said I did both. That to me was like, wow, you were either in or you weren't. And now we're seeing that explode to all of us being accepting of, hey, if you tell me you're working from home to crunch out on something, I trust you.
Yeah.
And that's the new normal. And people got a taste of this flexibility.
Yeah.
And watch the data. We're just starting to track. Like most clients are starting with this soft launch back of 25% and come back. We hope to get to 50%. I've got a boatload of clients saying we'll look at January.
Yeah.
But on the 25% back, they are not hitting 50% of those people coming in.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'd love to run with that a little bit. And maybe this is sort of a general consensus observation on my part, maybe combined with just my opinion. But you look at some of the core buckets of the population, and let's just stick with the office, for example, and go with the front office and the back office type of look, right? With the back office, it seems as though a little bit more conducive to being able to execute and be fully productive from home, whereas the front office or roles like sales and business development requires maybe a little bit more in-person human interaction, more so for the intangibles, which I think is important to point out. What I think people are not conveniently missing, but I think it's easy to miss right now given the environment that we're in, the intangible value of human interaction, from energy to some of the spontaneous interactions, whether, you mentioned sort of L&D, right? People are still yearning to learn and develop, particularly the younger generation. Will you get that as effectively remotely as you will from some of that spontaneous interaction in person? And so some of the contrarian opinions to this pro work from home are that, people are underestimating that value, and we're going to see it play out. And what are we going to do about it?
Yeah.
And, also to that point, Adam, I mean, we've sort of been operating with relatively narrow focus in this conversation on roles or teams that sort of can work from home at their discretion. There are plenty of jobs and plenty of roles that are on site by necessity, right? Any type of production, any type of manufacturing, distribution. Again, I mentioned earlier, quick service, retail, hospitality, co-working spaces, et cetera. So many functions are on site by definition. And not everyone has the luxury of sort of the even physical ability to work from home, right? Not to mention your great example of a role like sales that has at least historically, and people have been trained to, make that sale through in-person interaction, right? And so there's a vast contingent of the workforce that really this is not especially viable for this notion of discretionary at-home work. And navigating sort of that new reality is going to be challenging. To go with your example of sales, one of these things that may be permanent, I think is probably permanent within my company, is the notion of getting on an airplane for a single meeting, right, in a sales context, right? Getting on the road to go have an hour conversation in Maryland, in Salt Lake City, right? That probably is not going to happen very much anymore. And how do we sort of adjust best practice to sort of achieve those same outcomes, and also make sure that people who like being on the road sort of aren't left behind?
Yeah, I feel.
I was a 50% road guy. So
yeah,
I completely shut down in the second week of March, and I've not left the house.
Yeah.
And my wife hasn't thrown me out yet. But it's interesting. We did ask a demographic about what department, business unit you are on, and that they are, to your points here, not created equally.
Right.
So what we found are there's three top group types or functions that struggle the most: sales, external relationships, bring people in the office, go to, they're an active in the office group. It's all about building relationships. And when we probe deeper, it's not just the event, like I pitch this, it's the meeting beforehand. It's, whether you grab the lunch or a cup of coffee, there's building chemistry, which is really important. If I like you, I'm more apt to maybe buy from you. Then there's the same with HR and internal relationship people who are struggling more. That was the second group that popped out. That we asked up front, where were you working before, and now you're at home. So we see wide margins from people that said, hey, I was already working from home and now I'm in, versus I was primarily in the office and now working from home. Sales had the biggest gap. HR was second. And then R&D was the third. So people innovating, kind of working agile, war rooms, creative, coming together. There's agile. There's ways to do that virtually, just not at a robust level. And I don't think anybody was thrown into, let's try it all virtually with no warning. They're struggling. But on the flip side, I can go to finance, procurement, operational functions, marketing groups, legal, all these groups, some of them, especially the admin, IT, procurement groups, there was no change. We sent them home, and their experience levels, their engagement, their productivity, it's like nothing happened.
Yeah.
So I think offices are seeing, what is going to change. Well, maybe in the most expensive downtown urban market, I don't need to staff those roles there.
Right.
I think the biggest challenge companies face is everyone's in the mindset of me. Do I feel safe? Do I need to come back? So I'm in sales. I want to come back. But you got to think about your team. So if I had 12 people, marketing, finance, product development, working with me as a sales function, and we all came to the office, we may say half that team is not coming back, or maybe for a meeting here and there. But generally, they can do that remotely. We've witnessed that where a sales guy comes back and says, hey, I needed to, where's my team?
Yeah.
And you're actually trying to force them to come back. And these are the people with scores of like 96. I want to work more from home.
Right.
Being forced by salespeople to come back. There's a lot that has to be worked out there to say, how do we do this in a new environment? Because every team will have some virtual nature to it, and that'll be new for a lot of companies and businesses.
Certainly. Yeah, and I think it's a really compelling point, and at the risk of sounding cliche, like anything, I think it will inevitably come down to balance, and balancing the work from home with the in-office with all the, that third bucket of wherever exactly it is you are, you can still operate and you can be productive. But that's a really interesting point on the R&D and the think tank angle too. That again, back to the spontaneity, right, and the sort of idea creation that may suck. We'll see on a remote front. We can stick with a productivity topic. We could also take that into engagement too. I'd love to do that. But one last bit on the productivity, I'm curious, and maybe a little bit of a sensitive topic, but you had mentioned how, I think you made the comment, Brian, earlier of, productivity has been, possibly through the roof, so much so that now it's bordering on burnout. And I guess what I'm wondering, and what I'd love to hear you guys and your opinions on is that because at the beginning of quarantine, we had nothing else to do? Or is that maybe is that because we saw a precipitous drop in employment loss and people were in fear of their job security?
Well, it's interesting because we did this survey over 3 months. So the first in people, all of us felt like studying for finals. Like, hey, I'm singular focused. I'm only doing this. All the rest of it's been shut down anyway, but there's a light at the end of the tunnel. It's April. Come June, we'll be back. Situation normal. There's a degree of difference now for the companies that entered in June, where the company's like, I'm not sure it's this year.
Right.
I'm not sure my kids are going back to school in September. And all of a sudden realize, like, hey, I could study for finals for a month, not for 2 months. And, this is not sustainable. And we're seeing stress levels increase. We're seeing well-being scores go down. So, I do think the burnout factor is what we worry about. That maybe you're doing that, but gee whiz, who's going to leave a job right now? I'm worried if my company's in survival mode, no matter where we are, unemployment rates keep going up. So people are going to commit and do what is right. But let's say there's a cure and all of this goes away. I think people are going to say, hey, I need to have a better work-life balance. I need to feel a stronger connection to the company I'm working for. And those are the things that we have to solve now. For how do you do that with a more virtual environment? I never worried about connecting people to a culture, that they're learning or they're working out, moving around and feeling well-being when they weren't in the office, because that was only 5% of the people.
Yeah.
But now we call it a total workplace ecosystem. That's our term, where people are working in the office, remotely, third places, at home. And I've actually now got to worry about how all of that thrives and solve their issues. It's not about the productivity. We solve that. That keeps going. I got to make sure people can continue to be engaged and feel great about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think from a productivity perspective too, one thing that, my team has been contending with is a lot of the sort of traditional KPIs or barometers of performance are sort of out the window under these circumstances, right? Take sales, for example, right? A lot of conversations are happening. People are teeing up sales for the future. But the pace of new sales has certainly slowed. I think a lot of people make up for those changes simply by clocking more hours, right? Simply by being on Slack, on Teams, on email at any hour of the day. And one of the things that we're seeing with our Heyday customers is certainly Heyday sort of focuses at the beginning of the day, sort of a morning check-in where people are reporting on how they're doing. But we're seeing our customers also actually say, from a well-being perspective, the end of the day matters too. We want to see people, we want to encourage people to check out, essentially, and end the day in order to sort of maintain sanity. We're seeing one of the more interesting conversations I've had recently was with a global CPG who said that among their own internal studies around wellness, they were seeing people actually report kind of wistfully missing their Friday commutes home. right? They're a time to reflect, a time to disengage from work and perhaps prepare for the weekend or look forward to being with family. And that, to your point, Brian, about sort of the blurring between home and work, that moment of sort of disengagement is now gone. And yes, I do think, Adam, that it has a lot to do with anxieties and lack of other things to do. But it won't be sustainable in the long term. I think we know that pretty conclusively. And so how do we, make people feel confident in their jobs, confident in their productivity, but also willing to sort of take the time that they need as well to not be working.
Yeah, it's going to be a challenge, right? I'm curious to see how Brian makes out with balancing that total ecosystem. But on the commute front, I mean, I can speak from personal experience, guys. That that's one that's really hit me, and it's been fascinating because over the years I've heard over and over again by staff and leaders how if I were to just be able to eliminate their commute to and from every day or a few days a week, the hours that they get back, their productivity increase, the overall well-being increase would shoot through the roof. And I believe that, but conversely for me, my personal experience has been that prior to all of this chaos, I had a 3-day-a-week commute into New York City from the suburbs of New Jersey where I live, and I'm a father, I am a husband, I'm an executive, and that commute 3 days a week was blissful for me, for my mental health. Allows me opportunity to read, to sleep if I need to on public transportation. Not behind the wheel, to engage, to plan properly for my day, to decompress adequately for my day, and that I was not expecting. I don't have that anymore.
Yeah,
we eliminated the decompression chamber, right?
What's that?
So we eliminated the decompression chamber.
It's gone.
You go from work to live, which is one room away. And how do you mentally adjust for that? One of the things, and advice to anyone out there listening, we found like even our team norms, once we uncovered this data, we realized we had a lot of bad behaviors that we were just trying to force our way of meeting in this new realm, the way we used to meet. So as an example, there was a woman on our team who's got kids home from school. And whenever the kids would come in the room, she'd shut her video off, go on mute, hush, hush, who knows what, and then come back and totally miss something. And we realized she was actually getting stressed. She's feeling like, I didn't catch that question. Did I miss a deliverable? I don't want to ask. Can you repeat that? And we realized we could calm the waters by just saying, life is okay.
Yeah,
life is going to enter our meetings. Come in the room, and if your kid comes in a room, I expect an introduction. Hi, Bobby, what are you doing? Mom won't feed me. Okay. It brought the tensions down. She feels more relaxed. She doesn't miss anything. And actually, our bonding amongst ourselves actually improved because we learn a little bit. I didn't know she had kids. But instead of blacking out and wondering what happened to Sally, she went offline because we kept the meetings so formal like they used to. But in the office, you grab a cup of coffee, you have lunch. Those things can happen. Now they have to actually be part of your meeting because our day is structured. I don't see you in between these events. And lastly, when it comes around learning, like we use this example, if you show me a PowerPoint and I'm in a conference room, I may convene and say, hey, by the way, how did you change those bars from red to blue? And we're like, okay, great. We feel awkward in a meeting with 6 people that raise that. Like, why would you waste our time to do that? And now as a result, you're not going to go back and ask. And that kind of learning, just the sidebar things don't happen. So behaviors is the first. This is a change management thing. We have to say, not only is the work getting done, but how can we all thrive in this and what would make us better? So I think just embracing, let life happen in your meetings. It's kind of cool. It becomes funny at points. The dog barking or who knows what.
Well, I mean, it also goes back to your earlier point, Brian, about just the rapid pace of behavior change, right? I think that we are in a sort of messier world now, right? I mean, look, even from a corporate communications perspective, right? Take this webinar as an example, right? I mean, we are in our homes, right? This is not polished outbound, PR-driven communication. This is much more sort of real life, right? And I think that in that sense, people are willing, and again, we'll see if this is sustainable or not, but people are willing to sort of experiment with new types of communication between employer and employee, between employees themselves in a meeting context. And I had expected, for example, with Heyday to meet more sort of roadblocks from an implementation perspective, people being sort of less willing to change how they do business, how they communicate, how they manage their teams. And it does just feel in that sense like a moment of saying, this is uncharted. We're in uncharted waters. Let's experiment with difference.
You'd like on their survey, the last question we asked was a smiley face question of, how are you feeling today? Right up front.
There you go.
We could draw a correlation of, hey, if they say I'm feeling horrible, and we ask why.
Yeah.
And get this, you want to know, is well-being important? So 55,000 people, this shocked me. You say, how are you feeling? Tell us why as an optional comment. 36,000 people wrote comments.
Huh.
I mean, they're what they want to tell you why. Wow. Yeah. I'm expecting maybe 8,000. People skip comment boxes. But overwhelmingly, they want to let you know. Hey, so that's why I like the app thought. Like I said, bring life into the meetings. But imagine if you knew offhand, real time, how well your team was doing.
Yeah.
Or department. Why is this one doing well and this one's really struggling? In this world, we need to adjust week by week right now with all the uncertainty. People need that kind of reassurance. So. Yeah. That's why I think technology is really going to allow us to kind of move this forward.
I was actually going to make a pretty similar comment because you were saying too earlier, Brian, that one of the departments that this period weighs very heavily on is HR, and one of the things that we're hearing very consistently is, HR already wears an enormous number of different hats, and they did not 2 months ago expect to also be a de facto medical department, a de facto security department in terms of overseeing the health of their facilities, of their people, et cetera. And what we're hearing, at least with regard to Heyday, is I need technology to sort of keep me from going crazy in terms of wearing all the hats that I used to wear, plus all the hats that I have to wear now going forward. Figuring out how to leverage that.
People want just the data so they can stand back and see the forest. But if you got to spend time, and it takes a lot to figure out, how are people doing right now if you don't have a methodology to do that, or, how many people are in our building right now. Otherwise, you're just guessing. I've got a lot of clients who went into this without a work from home policy, without a flex work policy, without a well-being program. And we do see differences. Those that were prepared, I got one client, 1/3 of their people don't even have laptops, and they went home. So they're trying to do everything through webmail and what have you. And you can see their stress levels higher. But if you don't have a way to check in with them, someone say, hey, productivity's working. Maybe we should all go to desktops.
Agreed. All great points, guys. I mean, human resources, to your point, the caretakers of human capital on a new level now, they, above anyone else, may need technology as a resource to just be able to manage learning and development and their talent development, but also taking care of the well-being of their human capital, both physical and mental, and everything else that comes with human resources, be it liability, the employer relations, benefits, etc. It's becoming quite the department, right? But I think it's plainly obvious at this point to see, how technology is going to be a must in that equation in order to make sure that we're able to balance it all effectively in the HR data that comes out of it. I want to focus, and we've got 5 minutes left, guys, just to kind of give us the sort of warning here. But on that generation, that the millennial generation, Gen Z, Gen Y, I mean, those overwhelmingly are becoming a large majority of the population these days. Very soon it'll be 75, many of which are also now moving into positions of increasing responsibility and even executive roles. I still am fascinated by the fact that they're the ones actually struggling more so than the boomers. But now we can see why, right, through Brian's research, and it makes a heck of a lot of sense. But interestingly enough, the collaboration is there because we've got the tools, but and engagement, but the well-being is not, right? And so it sounds like the conclusion here is there's still plenty of wrinkles that need to be worked out, but I wonder if you all have any sort of parting points or questions or points of clarity for the audience before we wrap up on that one.
Sure. I mean, from my perspective, it's how do we think of the world in this total workplace ecosystem, first off, and then how do you bring real estate, technology, and HR as an integrated forefront to solve that, and get the business to answer how are their operations going to change. I can design all the stuff in the world, but if the business isn't actually taking their time to say, what is my new normal? It's hard to integrate and align those two things. But I think we're in this realm of we're embracing it, but we need to now put some stakes in the sand and figure out how do we solve it. Half my clients are actually, as a real estate company doing workplace experience, half my clients are HR. So it's realizing this is a people issue, that the new normal, we have to really figure out how to move beyond the four walls and take care of them so that they feel connected to culture, solve their well-being, and do that. And I think we were so maniacal about productivity. Even real estate in the past was all worried about size of cube, how many offices. And yeah, that's less the problem if people are working everywhere. But how do I keep these people connected, make them feel well? That's where the shift in focus and readapt our headquarters and environments to really connect people and make that the focus of attention going forward.
Right. Well put. Here we sit, remote, with all that. Yeah. Anything to add, Ian?
Not really. I mean, I think the only thing I would say is navigating the constant change. I think for me as a leader, as a manager, is something that I am thinking a lot about, right? We also have a lot of customers, for example, in California who are saying we're about to head back to the office next week. And now those plans have largely been tabled, right? And we're going to go through periods of sort of the roller coaster of all of this. And I think a lack of clarity on the future is one of the biggest challenges, especially for people, younger members of my team who are keen to get out of their studio apartments, right? There's a light at the end of the tunnel, and then there's not. And that sort of roller coaster is a big challenge.
Access to outdoor space. Another one where younger generations have less access to outdoor. Just get out there and clear the head.
That's right.
Being encouraging, but also remembering that millennials and their counterparts who are even younger are more comfortable than even myself with sharing right through digital channels and opening new lines of communication and leveraging that comfort level in new ways as a team. I think will be very important.
Agreed. All really great points. Well, guys, we've run out of time, I'm afraid, but it's been an absolute pleasure, never mind professionally, but just personally for me to spend the hour with you guys and hearing your insight, whether it's the tech innovation that you, Ian, and Heyday have come up with just in short order to cater to the sort of the health side plus the engagement side. And of course, with you, Brian, and your research and what you guys have come up with your index in short order is nothing short of amazing. So thank you, both of you. Thank you to Cushman and Heyday both for lending you guys to us for this time, and then for everybody joining. We appreciate you guys joining an hour out of your day today with us, and we encourage you guys to follow at Atrium social media or follow-up insight. Submit any sort of question or feedback you have on this hour, as we would love to do future events. So we appreciate it. Enjoy your Wednesdays.